Hi again then guys, and welcome to another game review and overall breakdown. Now, as always, there will be no major story spoilers in this review, but today we are reviewing a game which is actually one of my personal favourite games on any platform. I happen to purchase the PlayStation 3 version of this game, but you can get it on multiple platforms, and the game is called Alice Madness Returns, and the game is roughly based on the lore of Alice in Wonderland, as is indicated by the name and by the cover art of the game. You could probably guess that pretty easily. And I've always liked the look and the feel of games like Alice in Wonderland, and also, to some degree, the story itself. I like strange visuals, steampunk kind of styling, that kind of thing has always interested me. And this game is certainly very heavily influenced by steampunk, not necessarily culture, but definitely style. And we'll break down gameplay, we'll break down story to some degree. Now, often with a game, one of the main problems I find is that a game isn't immersive enough, the story isn't long enough, it's over too quickly. And that often happens in a game which I would have otherwise rated within myself as being even better, were the story just that little bit longer. Now, you play Alice Madness Returns, as the name of the game suggests, as Alice, and as you play through the game, through each major level area, each of which are very large and have multiple sub-levels within them, you can play with different versions of Alice, and you unlock different weapons throughout the game as well. Now, there are 5 primary weapons. You have a blade, which is the first weapon that you acquire, of course. You have a pepper grinder, which is in effect kind of like a gun to some degree, kind of a machine gun or Gatling gun kind of thing. You have the hobby horse, which is essentially a heavy attack weapon like a sledgehammer, and a teapot cannon, which is another projectile weapon, but it's kind of more like a missile launcher, whereas the pepper grinder is more of a gun. And the 5th weapon, which you also get relatively early on, is a small rabbit, which can be placed and used as an explosive, a clockwork rabbit. Now, as you progress through the game, there are various enemies that you come up against, as you would expect, and they vary from, as is with most games like this, the more relatively easy ones to beat at the start of the game, and as you progress throughout the game you get various bosses, bigger enemies, harder to kill, and in some cases some of them cannot be killed. Many of the characters in the game are revisitings of characters from the original story, such as the Queen of Hearts and various other characters like the Mad Hatter. They all have a twist on them, and to some degree they're kind of all opposites of what they were in the original story. Everything is topsy-turvy, it's the opposite to what you expect. And without spoiling anything, the story that you play throughout the game is of Alice re-entering Wonderland to try and break down her own mind and make sense of things that happened in her life, and try and find clues within Wonderland that can help her in the real world. And something that needs to be really made clear about this game, as is kind of indicated by it having an age rating of 15 in the UK at least, is that this is not a kids game. And I'm not saying that particularly because of the violence in the game or any visuals in particular, but it's the subject matter of the game which, apart from the fact that for younger kids it would go straight over their head for the most part, but it's not the kind of storyline which I would recommend younger players to play. And I can't really go into it any more than that without spoiling it. For those of you who have already played the game and finished it, you'll know why I say that. But this is a very serious game. It has some very heavy subject matter. It's much more than just Wonderland. So I would not recommend this as a kids game. If you're an adult, and the older you are, the more you'll appreciate about the game. As far as the visuals, it's by far one of the best looking games I've ever seen. I personally love the look of the game. I've always loved things like steampunk imagery, so the game appeals to me a lot. The way that the weapons and gameplay are laid out is very good. And the game, although not necessarily lasting a long time to complete, you can complete it in around 2 days or so at a steady pace, has a very rewarding storyline. The story is very good. It's not just your typical action game. There is a very hard-hitting story, as I alluded to just now. And although you only play as the one character throughout the game, Alice has a very good story arc. A lot of thought is put into the game, both into the visuals and also into that storyline and into the premise of the game. As far as the attack and defense controls of the game, it's pretty in-depth. You get, as I said, 5 or 6 major weapons to use throughout the game. There's a decent amount of control that you have with the character. Obviously you've got movement, you've got double jump, you can glide to some degree, you can use various potions to increase or decrease the size of Alice to get into larger or smaller situations. And there are a lot of collectibles to find throughout the game. There are special secret areas, there are memories that you have to piece together, which help again to break down that story and what actually happened in the real world. And the weapons that you actually gain through the game have to be used in specific situations in order to not just defeat enemies, but actually unlock certain areas. And there are lots and lots of hidden things to be found on the game. On certain versions of the game, you can also get a DLC content for free, I believe it is, I know mine was, that allows you to play a more nostalgic version of the original storyline with kind of PS2-esque graphics. And although that version of the game isn't as fun, especially after playing through the main game, it at least gives you the opportunity of carrying on the story in a different form if you so choose. Overall, the game is very atmospheric. The scenery is absolutely fantastic to look at. The character is easy to root for and good to work with. The movement, the interactions with other characters, and the weapon controls are really, really good. The weapons are very inventive, and I think overall, if I was going to describe the entire game with one word, it would be that word: inventive. Everything about the game is very clever, a lot of thought has clearly been put into it, and it's not a kid's game, not at all. It may be Alice in Wonderland, but it is not a kiddie's game. This is a heavy, adult-geared game, which if you haven't played, and you like story-based or action games, you'll definitely enjoy, I think. It's one of my personal favourite games, and I would recommend it to anyone who's a fan of games like that. And to be honest, even if you're not as much of a fan of games like that, I would recommend giving it a try. Now these days it's a bit more of a rarity to see the game, and prices tend to be all over the place because of its rarity. The version that I picked up was reasonably expensive for its age, but if you do get the chance to pick up this game, I would definitely recommend trying it at least once. Or if a friend has it, try and get the opportunity to borrow it from them, or at least play it with them in order to enjoy this game. But that's it overall for this particular review. I don't really give a grading system for the games. As a general rule, if I review a game, it probably means that I'm going to recommend it. I don't see the point of reviewing games that aren't really any good. So, by definition, I would recommend checking out this game. But that's it overall for this particular breakdown and review of Alice Madness Returns on multiple platforms. If you are new to the channel and would like to hear other game reviews of various game types, then be sure to hit subscribe down below to check those out and others that will come out in the future. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.